Hi, welcome to another episode of Overnight Success. My name is Oluwamayowa, and today I am joined by gallerist and lawyer Oyinkan Dada. Hi, Oyinkan.
Hi, Mayowa.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
We thank God. So when I speak to people on here, I typically start by asking them, a slightly zany question. So the one I have for you is, imagine you could time travel 10 years back or 10 years forward, but you're not allowed any do-overs. So if you do it, once you do it, it's done. Which would you pick? So you can't go into the future and decide I don't like it here and come back to the present. Do you get?
Wow. Okay. I was going to immediately say 10 years forward, but then I realized that maybe there are some things that I could have. I'll do 10 years forward.
10 years forward.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I think that if I go 10 years back and think about the things that I was doing, I don't really necessarily think I would change anything. I think I would still be on the same path. But then if you think about external factors I don't know, invest in Bitcoin, that would be that would be the only motivating factor to find a way to make money or be ahead of the curve in terms of investments.
To be honest, that's a good enough reason.
That's a good, yeah.
Just being able to invest in Bitcoin.
Just accumulate.
Put all the money you have in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And know that you could be a millionaire
right now
in a couple of years.
But then I just don't know who I would have turned out to be if
you had all the
I
money.
knew yeah, so I'm a bit scared of that person. So I'll just go ahead with everything I know now. Yeah. 10 years, yeah.
Hi, my name is Maya Waido. I'm a lawyer, writer, and journalist, and I'm also editor-in-chief of Culture Custodian. Overnight Success is an interview series where I speak to some of my favorite creators and entrepreneurs on the journeys and stories that got them to where they are. That is, young, successful people doing interesting things. I don't think there's any such thing as an overnight success, or is there? Find out more by watching this video. And when you're done, please subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, and share it with as many people as possible. Thank you. Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Overnight Success. Yeah. So let's talk about growing up. So you grew up in a polygamous family.
Yes, I did.
And when I think polygamous families, I think Fuji House of Commotion.
Which is exactly what it was.
Yeah, so you have 10 siblings and you're the youngest.
9 siblings.
9
So I'm
siblings.
the
Yeah,
10th.
you're the 10th of 10.
Yeah.
So you have 9 siblings. Talk to me about the experience and what it was like.
It was very interesting because, I don't know, it just, obviously when you're born into something, you don't realize how different it is. I think it took me being in my teenage years to fully realize how different my experience was from everyone else's. And because there was such a huge gap between me and my siblings, sometimes it still felt like I was the only child, because at a point I was alone in the house. But I think most of secondary school, at that point everyone had already left, so it was just me. But obviously I was always compared to the people that had come before.
9 people that had come before.
Exactly, we still had those dynamics. And I think because my parents are older, the ways were pretty much set in stone. So it almost felt like there was no flexibility in terms of what I could do, which obviously then led me to eventually rebel. But I think in my teenage years, I just sort of went with the flow, even though I realized it was a very restrained sort of environment. But I think it was a very unique experience in just seeing how I guess culturally different things were for us. And I think that it was a very good thing in terms of shaping my perspective of I don't know, arts, culture, just seeing different ways that people live, and it also affects the way that I relate to artists as well, because I just feel because of how different my experience was, like I'm very open-minded about learning about the way people live their own lives, because you realize that there's so many ways to live one life. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience to be in a house that had 2 moms and 1 dad and like 9 siblings. Yeah, it was insane.
Another thing I'm curious about, and this one is just, what were like your survival hacks?
I used to read a lot. Yeah, I used to read.
Explains a lot too.
Yeah, I used to read a lot. I was, again, because they didn't let me go out, so there wasn't really much that I could do but like write lyrics to songs. Like I remember days when I would just like play songs over and over and like write the lyrics myself. And then one time my sister came in and was like, you know, there are lyric books, right, that you can buy. And I thought, oh, sorry, I thought I just had to do it myself. But like I would just like write lyrics or like, I don't know, create scenarios in my head or like, it's just like a lot of like immersing myself in culture. I mean, lots of like reading, a lot of like learning about artists. My dad used to play like a lot of fela as well, which was interesting. So like a lot of those like Yoruba artists I was very familiar with from a very young age. Also observing like cultural nuances, the way that my parents related with each other, which was very different from the way other parents do. And like just understanding the culture, sometimes tagging along to parties with them, which I sometimes had no business going to, because these are like, I was sitting at the table with adults and I had no business listening to what they were talking about. But it was just very interesting to see the way that the dynamics between them. So yeah, it was very like insular way of living for me as a child, I think.
Okay, so, and then this is something we've spoken about previously.
Yeah.
But obviously going to Antioquia, which is a school a lot of people like you do not go to. So talk to me about that experience.
Again, like another very unique experience, because I felt that, actually, let's take a step back. So I went to Antioquia and I was living in Parkview, and it was just like a stark difference.
Yeah.
In terms of like a lot of the kids that I went to school with weren't necessarily like living where I was living. And then I would then go to church, which had more of a mix of people that sort of like lived in my area. Yeah. But because we didn't go to school together, there was like a gap in the way that we related to each other, because we couldn't like quite connect. But school was interesting because even though like there was this sort of like socioeconomic gap between me and like a lot of my peers, it also just was very instrumental in giving me a more like expansive view of the world.
You were head girl, Abby?
What did you say? I was head girl. Yeah, I was in primary school and in secondary school. I was like, you know, kept it going.
High achiever.
You know, but it was very interesting because like a lot of the kids, like they spoke Yoruba on a daily basis. Like that was just normal.
Yoruba good?
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good. Like they spoke Yoruba on a daily basis. Like the things that they cared about were just, I don't know, it was just very different. And it just made my world bigger in a way. But in the same way, it was also a bit jarring mentally, because I would have preferred some sort of like continuity and like being able to, I don't know, be able to hang out with my friends when I go home. But because that was there, the only time to build those relationships was in school. And when the adults are not sort of like relating with each other, children don't get that continuity in terms of like their lives and like who they see outside of school and all of that. But I think it definitely gave me an understanding, especially like when you live in Nigeria and you just know that sometimes it can feel like you're in this bubble where you go to the same schools, you hang out at the same places, you've known like certain people since you were like one, but to understand that there are people living like vastly different lives to what you see in your social circle is like, I think it's a very important experience for people to have. But yeah, I think it definitely shaped me into someone that just, I don't know. Yeah, I think it definitely shaped me into someone that just like understood different cultures, understood different backgrounds, understood like I had a very keen idea of like privilege from early on because the kids there didn't mince words like, oh, you live like, oh, you that you live in Ikoyi, like what are you even talking about? And it was like, and it was fair enough because I couldn't hide it. Yes, that's what that was, but they weren't like, it wasn't this thing of them trying to like treat me better. In fact, they even like were rude about it, and that was like fine because at the end of the day, which is very funny to me because like sometimes I see people when their privilege is pointed out and they get very like defensive.
Yeah.
I'm like, you kind of just have to accept that that's what that is and like figure out a way to, I don't know, because you're not going to let go of it, right? You're not going to wake up and say, well, I'm not going to live here anymore, or I'm going to pretend like this is not the life I'm living. But it's really about like, what do you do with those resources that you have, and like, how do you become like a better person for it, and contribute meaningfully to the world, I think.
That's a very good. That's a very good insight. Because to be honest, I hadn't really thought about it like that.
Yeah.
But then, you would go on to study politics, international politics at King's.
Mm-hmm.
So, coming with all this, this worldview you had,
mm-hmm.
which is unique, I'm curious about like what influenced what you wanted to like obviously study at university level.
Yeah. It's very interesting because there was a point when I thought I was going to be an architect, and then there was a point when I thought I was going to be, I thought I was going to be a model. Yeah. No, I think it's kind of too late for that now. There was a point where I wanted to like act. I just went through so many phases. So I was very involved in like drama in school. Like I used to do, anytime there was like any play, anything, I was always there. So like I was in drama club essentially, and I was just very like always performing essentially. So I had those aspirations, but I'm not quite sure what made me choose politics, because there's just like so many different things. I think when I was applying to do media, but I already wrote my what do you call them, the statement, the personal statement, and then my sister saw this and I was like, wait, you're applying for media? No, don't do that. I think you should do something.
Was it like, were you trying to be like, I'm trying to change the world, I'm trying to come back to Nigeria and do XYZ?
It was
injustice?
it was just like very, obviously I had no understanding of anything, so I just thought, well, this sounds cool and I can do many things with it or whatever. But my sister saw it and thought politics would be a better fit. And when she said that, I was like, oh, fair, I guess. Like I didn't really care too much at that point. I just like wanted a degree that I could,
That's what means you're really smart. Because like, for you to just like decide what to study in uni on a whim.
Yeah, it was
because I can't imagine. Like there's certain things I can't imagine studying. It won't even happen because my brain can't even process it. But just even the idea that you're like, oh, okay, cool, okay, bet I'm gonna do this. Like,
yeah, I mean, I was doing history. I did history, politics, and media. So those are like my main courses. So it could be any of those. And she just thought that, politics sounded nicer. And I think I'd seen this Angelina Jolie film. I can't remember which one it is, where she was working at the UN. She was like saving all those babies. There's one particular one that she was like, this is like early 2000s.
It's so problematic.
And I thought, you know what, maybe this is my path in life. I always, something I have a keen idea of like being a teenager is like feeling like this person that could change the world. So that was always like, I always thought that maybe that could be me.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I don't really think that anymore. But in those early years, I had like that. I had those feelings. So when she mentioned politics, I was like, you know what? This actually sounds like I can do this. So that's how I made that switch. And I thought I would maybe work for the UN or like go to Amnesty International, which I did intern for them at some point, and then that quickly made me realize that, you know, this is maybe not what I want to do. But that was the path that I thought would make sense. So that's how I got there.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah.
But you would obviously then go and do like the law conversion.
Yeah.
And it's classic like Nigerian parents. Yeah, sure, you study this one, but you need like
this other thing.
So talk to me about where that came from and why you felt like you needed to do that.
That actually, for me, it wasn't even pressure from parents. I finished my degree, and at that point, you couldn't stay in the UK if you don't have a job. So I think they gave us like 3 months to find a job or get out. So like in my final year, I was already thinking, okay, I remember what home is like. I didn't go home very often, but the one time I went home, like I'd already seen the way like my parents were behaving. I just thought to myself, I don't think I can do this right now. Like I don't think I can handle going home. So what job can I do that's going to make me money and I can stay in the UK for as long as I want? And honestly, it came down to investment banking or corporate law. I was like, I'm definitely not going to be an investment banker because that's just not me. And law also gave me like 2 years more of education, which felt safe to me at that point.
Basically, you were buying time.
Yes, yeah. I was like buying time, and I think it eventually worked out because, you know, but I just was not ready to be at, I don't know, everyone was going to Goldman or JP Morgan. I'm like, this doesn't feel like the right thing to do. So law was, I just Googled like highest paying graduate jobs UK. I swear that's exactly what I did. And I saw like the grades that they needed, and I was like, oh yeah, I have that, so that's fine. Let me just apply to this and I will figure it out. So yeah, that was how that happened.
Okay, and then in the midst of all this, like you were obviously developing and building an interest that you would obviously nurture. So
yeah.
Like that's the interest in arts.
Yeah.
So I want to understand like while all this is going on. And I know that thing of like when you're in your late teens, early 20s, where you have all these things that maybe feel like niche interests, and then you now decide to double down on it. But I'm curious as to the point where it's like, okay, I want to get deeper into understanding art. So first of all, like what was the trigger into like, oh, I'm interested in arts? And then what now made you kind of be like, I really, really like this thing, and I want to kind of obviously understand it better.
Yeah. For me, my interest in arts started from my interest in politics. So obviously, politics, again, I described how I like fell into that, had these aspirations of, okay, we can change the world. I became keenly aware of like my blackness. At that point, I was reading a lot of like Chinua Achebe. So that was like framing my mind, and like, I was essentially going through a political awakening in my first year and second year of uni. So that was like framing so much. But because a lot of my political awakening was tied to the arts, I was then looking for a link to bring both together. And I thought, well, this politics degree I'm doing is very Western focused. You know, we're talking about World War II. We aren't really doing any like Africa related like issues. We barely explored the continent. We didn't do that on maybe like third year. I think like I did like 1 course or like 2 or whatever, but it wasn't a lot. So I thought, how can I bridge that gap? And at the same time, I was also listening to a lot of like political music. I was also going to exhibitions. I was just consuming a lot that was framing my mind very, very. All of this happened within the space of like 2 years, and because I was also a child that wasn't let out very often, I didn't make friends quickly in uni either. You'd have thought, okay, well, she goes to uni and she just becomes like, you know, people run wild when they haven't been let out. But for me, I didn't even bother. I just continued in the same way. I literally just go to classes, go to the library, listen to my Fela or Lagbaja while I'm studying. It was just very like cliche, you know, Black power or whatever. But that's essentially like what I was going through, and that was what influenced me to start my blog, which was Politics and Art. When I hear the name now, I'm like, whatever, but it'll stay in my heart forever. So that was when I started this blog. I would write about like just random news stories that come out in maybe like, I don't know, South Africa, just different African countries I was looking at. And that also influenced me to like go back in time and like think about like colonial history. So I would like I would just choose something and like write about it. And then I remember going to like the British Museum and like asking to like speak to people, asking to speak to some of the staff. For some reason, I thought I was going to do a documentary. I was like, why did I think that I was the first to know that, things were stolen, like things like that. And a lot of like, zeal from, yeah. So that was why I had the blog. What was the question? I can't remember where I'm taking this to.
Where the interest in art came from. But you've actually like...
Yeah, so that's where the interest came from. So I just did it as like, okay, let's start this blog. And I thought I was going to get more people to like write for me, but it just always remained like me doing it.
Because it was only you that cared about it.
Yeah,
like,
I was the only one that cared, so I just kept my thing going. But it didn't deepen until much later, I think. Like knowing where it was going, that didn't come until much later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about politics, but you already kind of touched on it.
Yeah.
And so now I want to, obviously this journey, like we're talking in terms of obviously from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. At a point, you decide to set up a gallery. Mm-hmm. So again, how did you get there? Like what inspired, what triggered that decision?
So this connects back to buying time after uni and deciding to go through with law. So I had my first year, I did the GDL, and then I had my gap year.
What's the GDL?
Graduate diploma in law. So there's a graduate diploma in law, which essentially, if you don't have a law degree, you can do that, and that essentially converts. And then you do the legal practice course, which has now changed to some other thing called the SQA, whatever. So I had those 2 years to finish those programs, but I had a gap in between. So that was when I moved to Lagos for a year, and then I worked at Artex, and I guess rediscovered like contemporary art within like the African context. And that was what influenced me to then grow the platform that I already had for Artex into some sort of online art platform where people could buy like affordable things. That was the initial idea. So I had our first exhibition in Lagos, which was a lot of things happened, but I guess it was the catalyst for everything that came. Had another exhibition. It just kept snowballing, and that's something that I've also always realized with like my path. It's like I never intend to reach that end product, but by taking one action that then leads to like 2 other things, 3 other things, and then I just suddenly find myself like deepening the roots, even if that's not what like I intended to do in the first place. So yeah, I had like a couple of exhibitions in Lagos, and I had to move back to London. And moving back, I just didn't want to stop for some reason. Like it just never crossed my mind that I had to. I just thought, why stop doing this if this is something that I actually enjoy doing? And I was already getting some attention from it, and I was already building relationships with artists at that point. So I just came back, finished law school, still continued, and then it was 2020, which obviously we all know, changed things.
The thing is now, the way I'm asking these questions is kind of messed up, but then you're talking about that 1 year you spent in Lagos.
Yes.
And I know because it's something we've spoken about.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that was a period of rebellion for you.
Yes,
the rebellion
it was.
you cited earlier.
Yes.
So talk to me about that and how you navigated it.
Okay, so this was me back in Lagos, finally. And I already knew, how things were at home. I knew that I couldn't be out or like do anything too radical, like just fully express myself. But for some reason, I thought I could, change things. I can go in there and like tell them this is what I need to do.
Them being
and
your
they would
parents?
listen. Yeah. I thought I could, make those. We could have those concessions. But I quickly figured out that was
that's insane of you. As the 10th child, they've done it
You know
9
what?
other times. You think that
Sometimes
as per
you
you are
think-
so special.
Exactly. I thought I had this divine, But anyways, quickly got there and realized that wasn't happening. So I thought, okay, how can I figure this thing out? So obviously, I still wanted to stay in Lagos. I just lied and said I found a job in Accra and that I was moving to Accra for like 6 months. But obviously, I was moving down the road to my friend's house in Ikoyi, and that's where I was. And they eventually found out. But I wouldn't take it back. That was exactly how it was supposed to be. But yeah, I quickly...
How did they find out?
Because apparently my dad's hospital was like next door to the house that I was staying in. And one day I was like going to work, called my Uber, was right outside, and then I just see my dad's driver in front. Obviously quickly got into the car, but by then it was too late. And it was a family meeting. He called my grandma. It was a whole thing. But I still said I'm not coming back. I was like, look, I only have like 2 months left, and I've been fine all this time. So what are you going to, you can't, at some point you just have to put your foot down. And I always tell my siblings, I'm like, why am I the one doing this work that you guys should have done 20 years ago? I shouldn't be fighting this much. You were all supposed to have done these things, but no one really moved back, so they didn't really have that experience anyways. People only moved back in deep adulthood. And at that point I was only 22, so no one was trying to listen to what I had to say.
Yeah.
Anyways, we had the family meeting. I still told them I'm not coming back. And that was,
How did they take
we
that?
all lived. I mean, at that point, I was just very adamant that I'm not doing this anymore. And my school fees was already paid, so I was like, you know what am I really losing? Maybe you won't talk to me for a few months, but we'll all move on at the end of the day. And I knew what I wanted to do, apart from just going out, which is a very valid reason actually, to be able to experience the city and meet people. If I didn't do that, honestly, I feel like half of what I have achieved wouldn't have happened, because I just wouldn't have had those experiences. And I wouldn't have done the exhibitions I wanted to do. I wouldn't have met the artists. I wouldn't have... there's just something about an energy. And 2018, 2019 was a very specific time in our culture in Lagos. There was so many incredible things happening, especially with the music. That's when the alter scene was growing. You just had to be out.
But to be honest, what you're saying, I think that I hear you, but I just imagine that as a parent, and it worked for you because you had a plan. You kind of had a clear idea of what you want to do. For me, it's this is not an umbrella, one size fits all approach.
It definitely isn't.
So people are NFAs.
Definitely isn't.
They need to be put on the straight and
definitely
narrow.
Isn't.
So, and now this is me coming back to your work as a gallerist. So, what are the animating forces you look for when you are considering talent to represent or work with? What are the things that you're considering? What are the priorities?
So this has really changed over time. But I'll say in the current state that I am, outside of obviously talent, the work has to be good. But something that's very important to me at this point is working with an artist that also has that innate hunger to want to go a certain way. Because I think it's very...
You sound like that Kim Kardashian these days.
Nobody wants to work anymore. I'm you need to have... Because yes, you can be talented, but I think having talent and also a vision is very, very important. And the vision doesn't have to be, the clearest thing in the world, but knowing that, okay, this is where I am, and this is the kind of artist that I want to be. And these are 3 other people that have done similar things, and I'm going to use these people as like some sort of roadmap to get to where I want to go to, I think is extremely important. I think the hunger is extremely important. I think the discipline is extremely important, because talent without hard work, I think, is just like really wasted. So like just having that, what's the word, grit to actually want to do it is very helpful for me. And in terms of like being a gallerist, when you're speaking with an artist, you just want to be on the same wavelength, because sometimes as a gallerist, it can come off as like being maybe too pushy or too like business minded if you're the one that's only doing the pushing, you know?
Yeah.
You kind of need the other person to also have the same goals,
Yeah.
in that sense.
But now, actually, that now makes me present a dilemma, because I feel like, obviously, as a gallerist, your priority is the commercial value, no?
Yes.
So how do you manage, and I imagine like with artists, which I think is what you were hinting at, but you were
Yeah.
not like saying directly, but like sometimes, like obviously artists have like, you know,
Their artistic
like vision that might not necessarily have
commercial value. Yes.
How do you navigate those conversations?
You have to navigate those conversations very, very gently. And honestly, art dealers have different methods. Like, I've recently been reading a lot of books about like the way different art dealers across time have operated. So sometimes you have art dealers that are sort of like idealists. So they're the type of people that they're not really motivated by commercial value.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always have to be, you don't always have to be someone that's motivated by making money to be an art dealer. You can also be someone that's just purely interested in the art and wants to help the artist achieve the highest form of like artistic expression that is, you know, that is critical to their career, and like that is that's a reflection of their practice. But you could also be an art dealer that understands the importance of those things, but also wants to make money and like wants to, I guess, like sell work to the richest people in the world, and wants to build their name in that way. So there's essentially, what I'm trying to say is like there's different ways to be an art dealer, and that's something that I have recently been analyzing within myself and thinking, within all these different factors, like who do I want to be? From the idealists, I definitely understand where they're coming from, because at the end of the day, the art itself has to have that it has to have that human quality. And when it becomes too commercial, it just loses its essence. And you can sometimes see clearly when gallerists are sort of like only motivated by money, because it just becomes very very superficial. It becomes very shallow. So for me, I think that speaking to artists and navigating these things, again, the type of artists that I want to work with, and I am working with now, are ones that understand the value in improving their practice and actually making art that is good, but at the same time also understand that the world is moving very quickly and we need to define new ways to operate, which sometimes may feel uncomfortable for them. But again, it's about trust, actually trusting that I deeply care about what they're doing, and it's not just like money related, but also understanding that we live in a world where they need to make money to survive. And people in a lot of ways only like respect artists when like they've hit like certain commercial milestones, and it's just getting them to that place as well. It's a constant push and pull, and it's something that I'm still learning. I'm not going to say that I've only been doing this for like 5-6 years, so I am still defining the kind of dealer that I am, but recognizing that everyone's goals are not the same, and also just being able to navigate that is a tricky one, but an interesting one nonetheless.
So I know that the next step in this art journey is obviously you creating a physical
space.
Signpost, outpost in Lagos.
Yeah.
So talk to me about A, how you got here, and B, what that journey is like right now.
How did I get here? I got here because for 5 years we've been doing this sort of like pop-up model. We don't have a permanent physical space, but we still like yielded some really amazing results for a gallery that doesn't have space. And for me, that's just a sign that I'm doing something right. And I think that it's always important to keep growing. It's always important to build on momentum. And that's essentially the aim in terms of taking this next step and opening in Lagos. And Lagos is important to me because this is where the journey started. This is where I had my first few exhibitions.
Full circle moment.
Yeah, it's a very full circle moment. And I think that as a gallery that not only wants to make money, but also wants to have impact, I think that by having a space in Lagos where we're able to contribute to like the local economy, where we're able to contribute to developing local artists, but also capitalizing on the fact that Lagos is growing as an art capital and bringing international artists into the city to experience what it's like, to be inspired by it, to create works here. I think creating this cultural exchange is something that is key to my mission. And it's just going to, in some way, revolutionize the way that the art market grows in Nigeria and like just in Africa in general. I don't think that we shouldn't be seeing Lagos as a place where we only solely like import artists. I want it to be a place where international artists are coming, but they're having like critical conversations with artists on the ground as well. It's a place for exchange. And for me, even in terms of like thinking about what our first exhibition is going to be like, I want it to be a melting pot for the global Black diaspora, with Lagos as the meeting place for these people. And I think that Lagos just has the energy for sharing ideas in a way that I just haven't really experienced anywhere else. And even when I speak to artists from across the world, from Brazil, from Mexico, from Sierra Leone, and I talk about them coming to Lagos, like I can see the excitement in wanting to experience that. And that's what we want that space to be. It's a space for cultural exchange.
Okay, and then another I'm curious about, obviously, is how you kind of combine your work as a lawyer with work as a gallerist. Like, I mean, you have the same 24 hours we all do, unless like
there's some hidden,
Yeah, so talk to me about how you kind of obviously navigate that.
I'm not going to like give illusions of like this is the best thing in the world and it's so perfect, because it isn't. I think what keeps me going is knowing that there's a goal. And this is something that I was actually speaking about the other day on my TikTok. I was giving people tips on having both a corporate job and like a creative business and how you navigate that, because I think there are ways in which that can quickly become unsustainable. And I don't want to sell this idea of something that's, unhealthy, because I think sometimes it really is, because the amount of sleep that you get isn't always great. And like just the mental pressures of having both isn't something that everyone can handle. So I think like you obviously need to think about that deeply before you even engage in anything of the sort. But for me, that's highly driven by being an independent individual and knowing exactly what my end goal is. This is sort of how the path has laid itself. I've known that to create a sustainable creative business takes time. And
tell me about it.
Yeah, exactly. It takes time. And to also create some sort of, because creative businesses are one thing where brand recognition goes a long way. And to create that brand recognition and to create the trust from the audience, to create trust with the audience takes a while. And for me, I've always thought, why not do this while I still know that there's something else that I can depend on for my livelihood? So this gives me space to experiment. It gives me space to take risks. So that's exactly what my thinking was. And, you know, when I feel ready, I can decide if maybe I want to scale down on law, or maybe I just want to fully move into becoming, you know, not just a gallerist, but also other things. I have the art magazine, also interested in fashion. So I think, you know, I'm in my 20s. If there's any time that I was going to grind and do all these insane things at the same time, now it's time to do it. And every day, sometimes I sit at my desk and I'm like, wow, this is a horrible day. Like nothing is going well. Or maybe I'm even like, I don't know, crying or something. I'm just like, wow, this is going to be really great for my memoir. Like, I'm going to be, when I'm writing this story about being in this office until God knows when, and like getting a call from my gallery manager that a painting has been lost, and now we have to like refund the collector. You know, those are the days that I will...
That's actually happened?
Yeah, that's happened. Yeah, that's happened. Only once, thank God, but, you know, things are emotion, so it will always, things like that, just, they happen.
You saying that, like, in terms of doing things, like, where you think, oh, this will be good for my memoir. Like, I was telling my brother recently, I was like, oh, there's so many times there are things I do in life. I'm not doing it for any other reason than just the plots. Like
for the plots, literally.
Literally for the plots. I'm just like, oh yeah, this will be fun. Like, let's try it out. So something you spoke about now that you mentioned, which you kind of did as like a throwaway line, but you know, may I pick on everything. So you're talking about fashion, obviously being interested in fashion. And obviously that's something that has come. And it's funny, when I said to you earlier, I was like, oh, it's not too late to motto, and you're like, it's too late. Well, you, like, I mean, you just did that. But, yeah, but now I'm curious about obviously this evolution into like obviously leaning into the fashion. So talk to me about that.
This is also an interesting one. And this also goes back to my, it goes back to when I was thinking about the types of dealers that they are.
Yeah.
There's also something called a branded dealer, which essentially, a branded dealer or a brand dealer, which essentially is a dealer that not only is known for the works of art that they deal, but also their own personal brand. And that's something that I deeply identify with. And that's also a reason why a lot of galleries are named after the founders, because it's almost like a cult of personality in some sort of way. To
build like a certain like language and connection.
And when thinking about myself as a Black woman that's one of the few like art dealers in the world, I've also thought about how do I take this to the next level as somebody that not only cares about art, but also cares about culture, also cares about fashion. And this is something that, again, I sort of fell into, but now I'm even more intentional about. And this is in terms of like what I wear, like what publications do I have relationships with, and like what sort of like events make sense for me to like partner with and, you know, do all that sort of stuff. Because outside of the personality, it also opens up the scope of what my artists can do. You've seen so many like interesting collaborations between like, I don't know, Dior, for example, and like Amoako Boafo. You see like so many cross-sector collaborations, which I think is something that I can leverage on, not just for myself, but also for my artist. So yeah, that's how this sort of like fashion angle came about.
On a light-hearted note, like talk to me about your drip today. Like what am
I wearing?
What informed each choice?
What influenced my choice? I was like, I want to go for a breezy, colorful, geometric look. Funny enough, this dress I queued 3 hours at a sample sale to buy. And I do really dumb things for fashion. So yeah, that was what influenced the look. And my rings are from Dakar, which is a very dear place to my heart. I always, whenever I go there, I just stock up on silver rings. So I always have them. It's like part of my armor, as they say.
Okay. And so now, around this, I round these interviews up by asking two stock questions. So the first one, if perchance I hired you as my producer, I sack all these people here, who are the guests you'll be booking to see on Overnight Success?
Ooh. Oh, interesting. I would definitely want to see Ozzy here. I think that would be a really cool person to interview.
Okay.
Do they have to be Nigerian?
They don't necessarily have to be. But obviously, it would be better if they are. But they don't have to be.
They don't have to be. Yeah, I think that would be... Let's think about one more person. But I remember thinking that it'd be interesting to see you interview Trump. But because just based on your political commentary and how invested I know you are in
we'll rock.
American politics,
we'll rock.
That would make for a that's like,
but we'll rock.
It's not even about overnight success, that's just for the fun of it. Exactly. We'll that would be very engaging and very interesting. So that's something.
Okay, and the final question.
Yes.
You sat down with me for what I think is probably building up to an hour.
Yes.
You allowed me to ask you all these questions. Is there anything you'd like to ask me?
Yes, actually.
Okay.
Thinking about creative businesses and fellow creative entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
What is your vision for your company, your media company?
When you say vision, what part are we talking about?
So essentially everything, because there's different parallels, different angles.
So the way I think about it, have you heard the Martha Stewart documentary?
Best thing I watched last year.
Yeah, exactly. So the Martha Stewart documentary, for me, it was kind of like a perfect distillation of we're trying to create an omni-media channel. So we want to basically create something for every form that there is. So we're going to do magazines, we're going to do books, we're going to do podcasts, we're going to do video content, we're going to do documentaries, we might even end up doing films, we're going to do media publications. It's just
taking up real estate, intellectual real estate.
Yeah, precisely, because the thing is so I think a lot of with the work we do, I say this thing a lot, sometimes it's about meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
And so you'll have people in your audience who like things a certain way. And you'll have people in your audience who like things in another way. And at some point, it's almost your work to kind of sometimes obviously segment for all these different sections. But I also think there's something in being adaptable. So it's also having for me, what I think is a very huge content archive. And so it's okay, how can we adapt and repurpose some of these things to kind of obviously connect in the world that we are in. And then I think another thing is just sometimes these things are the ultimate marketing tools. So when people see your work and they associate it with good quality, it means every time they see something you've done, they are more likely to either acquire it or buy it or check it out just because they are used to good quality from you.
Yeah.
So ultimately, North Star is, we want to be a media company, an omni-media company that captures and represents what young Nigerians and obviously subsequently Africans and the Black diaspora are into, and doing it at the most tasteful level, the most credible level, the most authoritative level, and inshallah also the most profitable level.
Which is very interesting because creative businesses and making them sustainable is just such an interesting balance to it's one of those things. And I think in thinking about one of the topics that I want to explore moving forward, if I were to have some sort of podcast or interview series, it would be interviewing other creative entrepreneurs and finding that point at which they knew that they could make this into like a profit-making, enterprise, or even if like they didn't know from the beginning, creating.
I don't think
and
anyone ever
reaching-
knows in the beginning.
No one ever knows.
Yeah.
But then I think there's just something about, I don't know, there's something about doing something for like 2-3 years and realizing like the power of the audience that you've created and thinking about how do I, in the nicest way possible, extract value from my audience whilst giving them
The best
value.
explanation I can think of, and it's so funny that it came from the person it came from, but it was from TMT's dad. And TMT's dad was, at the time, he was like, oh, you should work as a lawyer. He was trying to encourage us to kind of work as lawyers. And he was saying, he was like, think about it, like this thing triangulates. So think about a triangle. So when you start, you're at the base. And what that means is you're doing every and anything.
Yeah.
But the longer you do something, you start to like
Hone in.
So it kind of narrows. But as it narrows, you're getting to the top. And so
True.
the
'Cause
way
other pieces fall
fall
out.
up, yeah. So it's like, you focus on one thing. You kind of just do it consistently enough. You learn the lessons. You kind of see. And then there's always like what's the word? To the moon. When like something just happens that just
And it just gives you all the
like
momentum.
turbocharges everything that you're doing. And a lot of times it's like that's what everyone is basically just trying to
to
survive and adapt
You just have to keep
till
going.
they get to that turbocharge moment.
Yeah.
And then everything. And I think that's even like when we now think about it, because it's like, oh, people who weren't there when you were kind of at the base now see you successful. And they're like, oh, where did you come
well,
from? Like the idea of an overnight success.
Yeah.
And it's like, this person being grinding.
Because you kept at it. You kept adapting and fine-tuning.
Yeah.
And that's like the very important. And also like spotting the gaps and thinking, okay, the people that have done it, how did they do it? But also I need to think about, 2025, this is not 10 years
so
ago.
taking it
So if
for
I was
now,
to think about
contextualizing it for
what is
now.
going to make sense now, then what is the trend and how do I get ahead of that?
And that brings us back to how we started in
Yeah.
terms of the 10-year vision. Because I know you said you were
I would
rethinking
change,
it.
I would go back 10 years. I would go back 10 years. Now that I've thought about it, it just doesn't make sense because I also don't want to miss my life. So 10 years of my life that I don't, actively experience.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I want to. I'd rather go back and think about ways of even being bigger and better than I am now. So yeah, I would definitely be looking to make some key investments from 10 years ago. I would have started a podcast in 2015 and thought about the topics that people care about now. Who are the biggest podcasters now? And how do I?
Shits and gigs.
Definitely not shit. Exactly. So, and I'll probably go to Silicon Valley and find like the top 5 guys and, invest in their company. And I probably wouldn't even have to work right now. So,
Yeah, you probably wouldn't have to.
yeah.
Okay. So we're at the end of this interview. Thank you,
Thank you.
Oyinkan, for speaking to me. Thank you for sharing all these insights. Always happy to speak to you.
Thank you.
And to the viewers at home, thank you for watching. Catch you this time next week.